Howdy, everybody at Chess College. How you doing? It's a little cooler today. It's Wednesday, I believe, 17th of July. Only got a couple more weeks of this short session. Hope you're doing okay. I hope you saw, well, you haven't seen it yet because I haven't posted it, but at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, I have posted the essay number 5, I believe it is. And it's going to be a little different this time. This week, we're doing a week about poetry. Why does poetry matter? Does it matter? Do you read poetry? What do you think about poetry? I mean, a lot of people think they dread poetry. It's over romanticized. It's over romantic. That's because it's been reduced to a Valentine card, a Hallmark card. That's too bad, but some of our greatest writers in history of written language, from Shakespeare to William Blake to Charles Bukowski to Lou Reed to Bob Dylan, have written some of the greatest brief word couplings in the history of who we are. Reducing, maybe you saw the documentary, as you see the TED Talk, trying to reduce, something so poignant and profound into a few words instead of a whole book or a play or even a movie. It's down to a few stanzas. That's a great art form. Maybe you're trying to write some poetry. There's free form poetry. There's rhyming couplets and all that, which is probably bores everybody when we're in high school listening to all that stuff. And it prevents a lot of us from actually enjoying it and reading it and trying to get something out of it. One of my favorite rock stars of all time, Jim Morrison from The Doors, wanted to be a poet. His lyrics, listen to his lyrics. They are poetry. If you stripped away the music, he actually did a spoken word album, and he had some stuff published, but his rock star thing got in the way of it, and he went to Paris to try to clean up from his drug addiction and being a rock star, and he was going to write, and of course he didn't make it, and he passed away at the age of 27. Lots of people have a desire to express who we are, our stories, in this very minimalist, profoundly important couplings of our language. So many poets have a gift for language. They like to play with language. From Maya Angelou, to like Lou Reed from the Velvet Underground, they consider themselves poets more than anything. Why is that so important? Why does it matter? Well, it does. Because it's telling our story in a lyrical, rhythmic way, using word, language, lack of language, because a lot of it's about space. Like some poets don't like to say a lot. They say a lot by saying very little. And then there's epic poems. Homer wrote 300-page Homer's Odyssey is an epic poem. There are poets, male and female. Maybe you've done slam poetry, you've heard about it. It was popular, I think, in the late 90s and early 2000s. Slam poetry became a big deal in nightclubs. It was like a challenge to go in and read your poetry out loud on an open mic night. And in the sort of inner city hip hop world, a lot of hip hop is poetry. If you break down the language without the beats behind it, one of my favorite rock stars of all time is Patti Smith, and she started as a poet, And then someone said you should put a guitar to that. And so her friend Lenny Kaye would accompany her on guitar. And that turned into the Patti Smith Group, one of the greatest punk rock bands to ever exist, all based on her poetic language with a rock and roll beat. To make it more interesting, to make it more dynamic. Allen Ginsberg, a great poet from the Beat generation, wrote Howl, his famous poem in the 1950s. You could go on YouTube right now and see his poetry reading at City Lights Bookstore, which is right here in San Francisco. If you've ever been there, it's a great place to go look at books. It's famous. All sorts of writers have hung out there and rock stars over the years, from Allen Ginsberg, Jack Kerouac, Andy Warhol. It's a touchstone in the literary world through poetry. The owner, Lawrence Getty, was a poet. He believed in poetry, and so he pushed that belief out into the real world, and it became. I hate to say the word popular, but it became known. Very few poets make their living out poetry because who buys poetry? Agents don't want you to bring in poetry, but some poets have like Gary Schneider and Allen Ginsberg have broken through to the commercial side of selling your poems that supposedly matter. So the paper you're going to do this time, you're going to analyze a poem. I published it. It'll be on. The assignment opens tomorrow. You have a week to do it, so you haven't seen it yet. And it's a William Blake poem. And William Blake was legendary, disturbed, probably had mental issues. He might have been paranoid schizophrenic long before we had medication. He was seeing visions. He was seeing stuff. And then a lot of rock and roll people have, from Dylan to Jim Morrison to Patti Smith, have glommed on to William Blake as kind of the forerunner of modern poetry. He was writing a long time ago. And he was writing about the human condition in such a way that it was primal and truthful and honest. So look at that poem by William Blake. You'll see it tomorrow when the assignment opens. And I just want you to analyze it the best you can. There's no right or wrong here. There's no page minimum. You could look it up. You could research it to maybe find out some deeper meaning if you're clever enough to do that. I hope you are, because you're not going to. It's not going to become. It's not obvious. It's not evident as soon as you look at it. It looks confusing, like a word jumble, and but it isn't. It's deeply profound. It's one of the greatest poems of our lifetimes and our humanity. Means a lot, and maybe you'll get some meaning out of it. Take your time with it. Don't rush through it. Read it out loud and try to get the beats, try to get the pauses, try to get the musicality of it. And then write a paper, a page, I don't care if it's a page or two. I'm not putting a minimum on it. And tell me what you think it means. And does it have any resonance to you? Does it mean anything at all? Tell me that. But you do have to put in some effort. If you just go, it all's confusing to me, and that's the end of your paper, you're going to get a 0. That means you're not analyzing anything. Pick it apart. Look at it. It's the only paper you have to do this way. You're going to analyze a poem by William Blake. You have a week to do it, so you should have plenty of time to do it. It's okay to make mistakes. I just want to see you thinking and trying to understand it. That's all I need from that paper. Hope you guys are keeping up on um, your journals. Um, in the next couple of weeks, we're going to be doing. Um, I think we're going to be doing modern painters, probably some modern music and film, and that'll probably end at the semester. Um, so we got a couple more weeks of cool stuff to study and try to figure out our humanity within that art world. And when you dissect the poem from William Blake, then you have to do some research on Blake, find out who he was, what he did, where he lived. It will help put it in context to what he's saying. And why does it still resonate to this day? That's the beautiful thing about so often poets, they hit on something that is timeless. And that becomes art. And it becomes our story. You have a story to tell. Maybe you write poetry. You want to share it in the discussions? Please do. When I taught this class a couple years ago before they closed it all down for the pandemic, and it was in the classroom, one of my students wrote a kind of a rap thing. It was great. And he said, "Can I do my rap instead of writing this paper?" And I said, impress me. And he did. It was well worth it. So be creative. Be free in your writing and your thinking. Don't get scared of it. Don't get scared of the language. There's nothing scary about it. What's scary about anything is ignorance and not approaching it as something to learn and to thrive and to learn something about who we are, and why this stuff makes a difference. I hope you do find that in that. And I will talk to you later. Next week we'll do, maybe we'll do movies next week. We'll see what I feel like. Take care, stay cool. It's a little cooler today. And write a poem.